Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2025 Rick Steves Europe Festival of Tours. I'm Lisa Friend, and I'm delighted to be your moderator this evening as we explore the land of cheese, couture, and culture that is France. Everyone's a winner right now with our 2026 tours because everybody is having an early booking discount available to them. So it's $100 off your tour. No promo code is needed, and that will be going on until July 7th. If you can't wait until 2026 and you want to hop on a 2025 tour, we do still have some tours with seats available, and they are on sale on our website. We have 46 different itineraries for you to choose from. So I believe there is something for everyone. But tonight we're talking about one of my favorite countries, the country of France, and the itineraries that spend the most time there. So I'm going to turn this ship over to our friend Gabe and welcome him on to the show tonight. Gabe, bienvenue.
Bonsoir, Lisa, ça va?
Oui, ça va?
Oui.
I'm always stumped by the ça va. It's going. But I'm so happy you're here, Gabe. Gabe, have you ever been on any of our France tours?
So, Lisa, I am really excited for this presentation tonight because normally we would go to our dear Steve Smith, but he is engaged in research. So I have volunteered to co-present tonight's presentation, but I've actually never been on one of our France tours. I've been on several of our tours in other areas, but tonight I'm going to be joining as somebody who has actually lived in France and has traveled independently there, and who, I'm sure like many of our viewers, would really, really like to go on one of our France tours. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit about French culture from the perspective of an American and why this might be a region that our viewers would want to go to when deciding between regions in Europe. And then in a few moments, I'm going to welcome on our guest that is going to be our tour expert.
Sounds like they're in great hands. I will disappear behind the scenes and I will see you at the end with the Q&A session.
Thank you, Lisa. See you then. Au revoir.
Au revoir.
À bientôt. I'm pulling out all of my just little French travel vocab phrases. And welcome to all of you. I'm so glad that you're going to be exploring our France tours with us tonight. And before we dive into France specifically, I want to take just a couple moments to talk about our Rick Steves Europe travel style. So those of you who have been on multiple of our tours before might already be familiar with this, but if you've never been on a Rick Steves Europe tour, or maybe it's been a few years, I would highly recommend that you join our Tours 101 information session. The Tours 101 session is designed for new prospective tour members who just want to know what our travel style is like, what our travel values are, and if our tours might be a good fit for you. So we have a few of those upcoming. The next one is on May 8th, but we actually have several dates updated on our website through August. And if you really can't wait until May 8th, we also did one of these as part of the festival last week, so you can watch the recording on the Festival of Tours website. A quick note about our travel style before we get started, though, just to make sure everybody is on the same page. While we want our travels to be fun and for you to find many cultural thrills, we also want travelers that are curious and that want to learn about art and history and that see travel as an opportunity to challenge their preconceptions and broaden their perspectives. We keep our groups small, 24 to 28 people. We have full-size coach buses, so they're only about half full, so you have plenty of room. And we, of course, make everybody sign a no grumps policy, and we are pleased to find every year that our tour members are overwhelmingly flexible and positive and joyful. We like to use centrally located hotels. We are not going to be using Hyatt and Marriott hotels that are on the outskirts of town that feel exactly as they do in the US and have every amenity imaginable. All of our hotels are going to be clean and comfortable. We prioritize hotels that are quirky and family run and independently owned, and most of all, hotels that are in the city center. We believe that the greatest amenity is being able to walk out your front door and be immediately amidst the sights and sounds of the city. We, of course, focus on connecting with locals and having local experiences. We'll hear about a few of those tonight. We also encourage our travelers to pack light and right, meaning no checked baggage, just a carry-on bag and a personal item. And our tours are quite active. They have plenty of walking. You need to be able to stand for a couple of hours at a time. You can find specific activity ratings for our specific tours at ricksteves.com. We have ratings by tour and then even give a strenuousness description for each day. Finally, our guides are incredible. They are the soul of our tour program. And in addition to having a Rick Steves Europe guide for the entirety of the tour, we also have many local guides that are experts in certain areas so that we can hear from a variety of voices as we tour. And most of all, our guides are on your side. They get no kickbacks from any shopping that you do. They're not incentivized to sell you excursions. And all tips for the guide and the driver are included in the price. So you pay your price up front and you know that you have a guide that is on your side and will be doing everything in your best interest. Speaking of our guides, I am excited to introduce our guest for this evening. So if I had to create a Mount Rushmore of our Rick Steves Europe France crew, of course, I would put Rick on it. Of course, I would put Steve Smith. Many of you probably know Steve. You've maybe seen him in the TV show. He has been our go-to France guy for decades. He has led tours and also helped author our guidebook. But I would add to that Mount Rushmore, Virginie Moré. Virginie has been also guiding for us for over a decade now. She is actually in the midst of research for the guidebook right now, taking time out of the middle of her night to meet with us. So I am so grateful to have Virginie here with us tonight. Virginie, bienvenue à Festival of Tours. Welcome, welcome.
Bonsoir, Gabe, or bonjour from me. It is actually quite early in the morning, but I'm excited to be joining you tonight.
Well, Virginie, we are so grateful again. I know you are in the midst of a busy week, and I'm wondering if you can tell us where are you right now and what is it that you're up to? What do your days look like?
I'm in a pretty cool hotel, very typically old world France, what you see behind, in Aix-en-Provence, the big city in Provence. And I've been working on the book research for the last week, all of the French Riviera and Provence. So
And
voilà.
Virginie, in a nutshell, what does a day of book research look like?
Oula, every single line of the book I get to read. So get up in the morning, get ready with my day. Then it starts with hotels. You check every hotel. I cannot sleep in every hotel, but I do go check rooms in every hotel we list. Then I will go to the tourist office to see, what's new, what can we expect for the future, because you always have to think about next year, what's coming up. Then we do every walk, every museum, update everything. So it sounds like a lot of fun, but you actually don't get much of the culture. You actually just check everything and you have to put yourself in the foot of the reader and what are they going to see. And then in the evening, I get to eat. But I get to eat late, very late, because I check every place first and try to see if I spot a yellow and blue book on any table, talk to readers about what's their experiences in that city. And then I pick a restaurant, what I want to add. If I'm not sure about one thing, I make sure I eat there. And then I start again the next day in a new place. Voila.
Well, Virginie, on behalf of me and all of our guidebook readers, I have our guidebook right here. I was actually
Très
using it
bien.
to prepare today. I
Parfait.
just want to say thank you. We often hear from readers that say, oh, like that's my dream job, just travel and help update the guidebooks. And I know it is a labor of love for all of you, but it is labor. It is sun up to sundown. So thank
It
you so
is.
much. And you also lead every single one of our fully guided France itineraries. So I'm very excited to hear from you in just in about 10 or 12 minutes. We will explore each one of our France itineraries with you. But for right now, I'm going to give us a little sizzle reel overview of French culture. Virginie, you of course know French culture better than I do, but I'm going to be coming at it from a lens of an American traveler. And what should American travelers be aware of before going to France? And when deciding between regions in Europe, why might they choose France? And I think that there are many reasons. So
Sounds good.
let's get started. All right. So the first thing that I would like viewers to know is that France is very large. We in North America, whether we're in Canada or the US, we're accustomed to having enormous countries, but by European standards, France is extremely big. It's slightly smaller than the state of Texas and has twice the population of Texas. That makes it the second largest country in Europe behind Ukraine by area and the third largest by population behind Germany and Great Britain. So France is one of the titans of Europe, and it has one of the most diverse geography of any country in Europe. So here we see a little map. This is at the start of the guidebook of some of the major sites, and we're just going to take a peek at a few of them now to show you the diversity that this one country has. So up in the northwest, we have the dramatic rugged cliffs and beaches of the D-Day beaches in Normandy. In the middle of the country, we have a couple beautiful river valleys with the Dordogne River and the Loire Valley. Then we soar all the way up to the mountains on the eastern side. This is Mont Blanc, the tallest mountain in Western Europe, on the border of Italy and France and Switzerland. And not far from that, at sea level, we have these beautiful blue seas of the French Riviera, where you will find people in Speedos on beaches rather than bundled up on top of the mountains. And then in the middle of all of that, we have these natural wonders like the Verdon Gorge, which is known as the Grand Canyon of France. We have the Calanques, which are kind of these rocky inlets in the south of France where you get these secret secluded beaches. And of course, we have miles and miles and rows of vineyards. And that is certainly going to be a staple of French travel that we're going to hear about from Virginie shortly. And as often happens, along with this geographical diversity comes cultural diversity. So of course, there's diversity between the big cities of Paris and Lyon and the tiny small towns like Colmar and all of the hyphenated ones that we will get into later, Villefranche-sur-Mer and such. But also in the corners of France, we get these really distinct cultural flavors, often that are bleeding over the border from the neighboring countries. So in the Alsace region on the east, you would be forgiven for thinking that you are in Germany. We have all of these half-timbered houses, the little flower boxes, and for dinner, you're likely to have some bratwurst and sauerkraut. You might even pick up a pretzel. This one is onion flavored. A little to the south in the French Alps, you might think that you're in Switzerland. This reminds me a lot of Zermatt with the mountains in the distance. And you can, in the evening, have some fondue to warm you up, or even raclette. Further south, in the southeastern corner of the French Riviera, it feels like Italy with the palm trees and the pastels and the large beachfront properties. And there is plenty of pasta to go around. At the southern end, in the Languedoc-Roussillon, Virginie, I'm going to need your help on this one. How do we say this region?
Languedoc-Roussillon.
Languedoc-Roussillon.
Très bien,
I am
parfait.
glad that we have a French native here. But in that region, very close to Spain, you can find yourself paella. If we go over along into the very southwestern corner, the Basque country, of course, straddles France and Spain, and they have very strong regional traditions and their own language. And then going up to the northwestern corner, you would be forgiven for thinking that this is Ireland or Great Britain, but it is in Brittany. Brittany has a strong Celtic heritage that it shares with its neighbors just across the water in the British Isles. And you can see this in the types of buildings in the small town, in their little niggling lanes, and in the freckled school children. And of course, this is the part of France where you would dig into a hearty crepe. But France is not just large, it is not just diverse, but it is also long, and that its history is long. You find some of the best preserved cave art in all of Europe in France. This is the Lascaux Caves in the Dordogne region. You find some of the most monumental examples of Roman architecture, like the Pont du Gard, that we'll get to later. You have cathedrals that were constructed in the Middle Ages and essentially copied by other countries all throughout Europe. You have great philosophers throughout the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries going into the Enlightenment. In fact, many of the ways that you think and understand the world were developed in France and by these French philosophers. In the 16th and 17th century, with the construction of Versailles and the various châteaux in the Loire Valley, France really announced itself as being the first European superpower. And of course, in the case of Versailles and King Louis and Marie Antoinette, we know what followed that, the French Revolution. And this is a revolution that sent political ripples around the world. It actually inspired similar revolutions, especially in Latin America. In the 20th century and the 1900s, we have the emergence of Impressionism, which kicked off the period of modern art that we are in today. And of course, in the middle of or in the early and middle of the 20th century, France had 2 world wars fought on its soil that it needed to recover from. It became one of the 5 permanent members of the UN. And for decades, the international language of diplomacy was French. Today, France continues to be really protective of its culture. I put our Rick Steves Europe phrase book here because one thing as a language nerd that I love about France is that there is an Académie Française that regulates the French language. It's a committee of 40 academics, and the academics are literally called immortals. That is their title, and they are tasked with setting the rules for the French language, writing the dictionary, and so France continues to exert a lot of control on its language and culture. In France, radio stations are required to play 40% French songs on the radio to make sure that there is representation of French voices. And the rules for the various French wine regions, I think, are more strict than the actual laws passed by the legislature. So why do I start with all of this? And I think I start with how large, how diverse France is and how long its history is, because oftentimes I think that French people can get a bit of a reputation in the United States as being maybe a little snobby or standoffish, or they can be a bit brusque, or, oh, I'm afraid to talk to somebody in the street in Paris because they might kind of be rude to me. And I think that it's important to realize that France has the mentality of a global superpower, and it has been. And yes, today we have some larger economies and superpowers emerging around it in North America and in Asia. But France is a very proud nation. It has offered a lot to the world. And I think that it's important when you go to France to approach French people with that understanding and with that sense of respect. In my experience, you don't have to completely learn French, but if you learn a few pleasantries and maybe learn how to ask somebody, do you speak English in French, rather than just waltzing up to them and assuming that they are going to conform to your culture when you are on their soil. So I think in some countries like Belgium and Croatia that are much smaller, they have to be a bit more go with the flow. They have to cater to some other cultures. They have to have a sense of humor about themselves. Of course, everybody wants respect, but I think that France demands it and deserves it. And so in my experience, if you approach the French people with that sense of respect, they're extremely warm and kind and very hospitable. And I have had the chance to experience that on multiple occasions. This is my first time in continental Europe. This is me on top of the Eiffel Tower at the tender age of 20. I was studying abroad in the United Kingdom, and on my Easter break, the first place that I went was Paris. And I was blown away by the art, the architecture, and the history that was palpable there. It literally is a playground of European history, and you can see I'm very much treating it as such. But I think if I could only travel to one country from the point of view of having to understand European history and art, I think that I would choose France. I took in everything from these frescoed ceilings in Versailles to the quirky modern architecture in the fountain outside of the Pompidou Center. My friend and I even made it up to some small hill towns. This is in Vence, just outside of Nice. But when I think about that first trip, the one image that most comes to my mind is this image of the Tuileries Gardens just outside of the Louvre, with the park just filled with French people. And I was astounded by how much green space I encountered in Paris. It's a city that has clearly invested in its people, both in terms of green space, but also in terms of making its cultural artifacts accessible through museums. And I think, to me, I really came away with this sense that the French, they pay much higher taxes than we do. They pay in a lot to the government, and they expect a lot in return. They know that they, the people, are in charge. There is a strong sense of civic pride, a strong drive to pitch into that, but also high expectations for having good quality living. And the other time that I saw this was a few years later, when I had the privilege of spending a summer in the southwest of France in a small city that you are unlikely to find in any guidebook. It is called Castres. I lived with a host family there. This is their main site along their river with all of these old, beautiful tanneries. And this is in the middle of the day, so the plaza is not full. But even in a small city that doesn't have much tourism significance, there is so much investment in the public spaces, in the plazas, in beautiful boulevards. Here you can see the plaza all filled up on Market Sunday. I was there just a little over a month, and there were multiple festivals in the city center, music festivals. You saw people dancing in the street. You saw uh, festival rides just popping up in the middle of town. And on the weekends, my family would take me to the lake on the weekend up in the mountains. We would go to a water park where you must wear a Speedo. They sell them in vending machines if you don't have one. Or we would go to the tiny little villages on the outskirts of Castres. And I think I learned there what Rick calls l'art de vivre. So this photo is back in a larger city, back in Paris, I believe. But all throughout France, there was a sense that people weren't just trying to get ahead. They weren't just trying to make their life bigger and accrue more possessions, but they were trying to balance hard work with good living. I have never had longer meal times than I did with my French host family. We had lunch and dinner together every day, probably for about 45 minutes at least each time. My host parents were both teachers, but were able to afford a beautiful house. They worked about 35 hours a week. Everybody in France gets, at least 5 weeks vacation. And I think that hopefully, in addition to taking a tour, I would challenge you, if you do take a tour, try adding a few days in one of France's great cities before or afterwards, and allow yourself a few days to just have that l'art de vivre, the art of living, taking in the beauty, taking in the civic life, and just communing with the people in the public spaces. So that is a little taste of what I think is the character of France, how I experienced France as an American traveler. And now I am going to go back to Virginie. And Virginie, how do you think I did? Is there anything that you would add?
Thank you very much, Gabe. It's just, I work with a lot of Americans, and your story is what I hear all of the time. People are afraid to come to France. Some of them, I wouldn't say everybody. And I make a point on my first night meeting to ask people, how many of you are first-time French travelers? And there are always a few of them. And I ask them, how come you haven't been to France before? It's the most visited country in the world. And I tell them very fast about the formality of the French, and all of the stereotypes that you hear is just the fact that we are proud of our language, we are proud of our country, like you explained. And as long as you know that and you're ready to embrace that and speak a little bit of French, then the French are very nice. So, but thank you for showing all of this up front. And then we're going to go on to the itineraries, I guess, now.
Yes, so Virginie, we have 5 itineraries that we're going to be going over tonight. 4
Mhm.
of them are fully guided tours, and then there's our MyWay Tour. And I'm so grateful that you're able to join us because you lead every single one of our
I
fully
do.
guided itineraries. So, like I said, I've actually never been on one of our France tours, but I'm excited to choose which one I want to go on next tonight. So, you have a big job ahead of you.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, so I think we will get started with the best of Paris.
Exactly. And so you've done a great job of talking about regionalism, but of course we have to start in Paris. I'm not a Parisian myself. I come from Brittany, and I'm not a city person, but I love Paris, and I've never met someone who doesn't like Paris. On the 7-day tour of Paris, we'll show you, get you introduced to the city, get used to the French, get used to the Parisians. And what I love on the tour is that we pick hotels and neighborhoods where you will feel at home. In a city of 2.5 million people, you have to get that connection. And this is the staff of the Londres Eiffel. When I go there, I have my room, always the same room, and I just feel welcome. And you will feel welcome too. Now, Paris is a great city that you can travel to all year round, whether you go at Christmas time where you have beautiful lightning. It's called the City of Light for a reason, or whether you come in the summertime and you have a picnic, a drink, and around the Seine River, like those people are doing. It's just a great city. On our tour, we're pretty busy. We start by going to the Ile de la Cité, where Notre Dame is, of course, and I'll talk more about Notre Dame, but we have another jewel of the Gothic architecture time period, the Sainte-Chapelle. And the Sainte-Chapelle, I love, it's divided into two parts, the chapel, and I take my travelers to the bottom part, which is pretty dark, and then I tell them to look down, and they arrive up, and they all rise up their head. And that's one of the wow moments on this tour, to see stained glass windows that dates back from the 13th century. Of course, this year, my wow moment was my last tour. In my first Paris tour this year in March was to enter Notre Dame. I was the last guide there. I was there when it burned on April 16 of 2019. And I was so excited to see it. It was so bright. There's still work going on, but you see the facade as it is today. On the side, there is less and less of scaffolding, and there's going to be still construction, but it's quite impressive to see how they were able to rebuild so fast and how bright it is inside. Close to Notre Dame, we have the Latin Quarter, which is one of the neighborhoods where you get to see what Paris was like in a way when Notre Dame was being built. So it's a very narrow street, which is unusual for Paris. And this is also the literary neighborhood of Paris, what we call the left bank, with the famous, for example, bookstore Shakespeare & Co., and where the university La Sorbonne is today. We have several branches of the university now, but this is the famous one. You finished that day, because we've been seeing a lot of things in the Luxembourg Garden. And like you said, the French know how to enjoy life. L'art de vivre is just to watch the kids playing, not on the phone, but playing, on the grass or renting a little boat on one of the ponds that we have in this big garden. Now, Paris is a big city, but we have different neighborhoods that are very specific. And my favorite one is Montmartre. Montmartre is the hill that dominates Paris with this mighty church, the Sacré-Cœur Basilica. And we get to explore this part, which still looks like a bit of a village. And what we all do on the tour, the 7-day tour of Paris, we take our travelers on a Seine River cruise, and we time it at night. So you get to enjoy all of the neighborhoods we've been discovering together from the viewpoint of the river. And it is cliche, but it's a beautiful city. And at night it takes on, beautiful colors. It's just, I've been on those boats for I don't know how many times, and I still enjoy them. So everybody likes this. You get to see Notre Dame lit at night, and that's always a wow moment also. Another neighborhood that we explore on the tour, and we have local guides to help us experience those neighborhoods, is the Marais. The Marais is the historical Jewish neighborhood, and it has lots of beautiful buildings, all dating back from the time of Versailles being built also. So that's the Place des Vosges. Again, l'art de vivre à la française can be experienced here. Of course, there's not just outside in the city, but we have mighty museum, and of course the Louvre is one of them. Now on the tour, we take you to the Louvre at night, well, late during the day, so we experience it with a bit less crowds, because as you can imagine, you won't be the only one who wants to go see the marvels of the Louvre. One of the marvels is the Mona Lisa will come, but another famous lady, the Venus de Milo, and of course the Mona Lisa. So highlights of the Louvre. And then what we do, we also take a day trip, because we are only an hour door to door from the hotel to this luxurious castle, the Palais de Versailles. We have a guided tour of Versailles to let you see how they used to live at the time, experience the Hall of Mirrors, the magic of the Hall of Mirrors, and then we let you free, because Versailles is a beautiful town and with beautiful gardens, and it's easy to spend a day there to get a little bit of a smaller town feel from your week in Paris. But we have more museum, and on our tour we also have a guided visit of maybe my favorite museum in Paris. It is less dense than the Louvre, and this is where we have Impressionist art. It used to be a train station, and now we have big Monet. And the Impressionist art is actually mainly in the Orsay Museum, but the big Monet I was telling you about are just across the river in the Orangerie Museum. And you have 8 wonderful panels that are stuck to the wall. And like this person in this picture, you just feel it's like you're in the garden, in a museum in the city of Paris. So voila, in 7 days, what we can do.
And Virginie, one thing that I love about our city tours is that they offer, we always, even if you're only in the city for 2 or 3 days, we talk about trying to become a temporary local, but that's something that you can do best when you're in one place for a full week. So in addition to some of those kind of blockbuster and really historically rich sites, for you, having been to Paris many times, what would you say is one of your favorite kind of temporary local activities to do that one of our travelers could do in their free time? Maybe a restaurant that you love or a smaller museum that you really enjoy.
I would say going to a market, going to a farmer's market, because there's no other way to be like a temporary local. There is a Costco outside of Paris, but the Parisians don't go to Costco. Only the people who live on the suburbs. People go shopping almost every day. Our neighborhood, the Rue Claire neighborhood, just 2 minutes from the hotel, you go in the morning and you see people with their little shopping cart. And that's being a temporary local, just going to the cheesemonger and picking the cheese, going to the butcher, or creating your own picnic that you can then enjoy in front of the Eiffel Tower. For me, that's what makes France.
I still remember that first time I was in Paris, I saw a man biking home with a baguette sticking out of his backpack, and I just thought, oh my goodness, like they actually do just pick up their bread on the way home.
And he would probably be wearing a shirt like the one that you have, striped shirt. That's typical.
I wore this shirt intentionally tonight, so I'm
I
glad you
knew.
noticed. Well, Virginie, thank you for that glimpse at our Paris city tour. And there is another tour that we have that starts in Paris. So I'm wondering if you can take us on our Paris and the Heart of France tour now.
Yes, of course. So that's the itinerary we have. So we start in Paris. We have 2 full days in Paris. I'm not going to talk more, but we do a few of the activities, but in a different way. And then we leave the city, and to understand the architecture of the Middle Ages that you see everywhere, I think this spot is, people don't know about it, but they get to the castle. It's 3 hours from Paris, and they are building a castle like they did in the 13th century. So the time where Notre Dame, the Sainte-Chapelle were being built. So you see the squirrel wheel, you get to talk to the workers. It's just quite an amazing way to understand better how France, the beautiful buildings were built. Then we get to a small town, and I know everybody says, oh, I want to stay here longer, and I have to remind them that they're in France for just 11 days, so they have to come back. This is the cathedral in the city of Bourges, not just Notre Dame in Paris. We have amazing cathedral all over France. Then we make it to the Loire Valley, and on this tour we get to the mighty castle of Chambord, built in the Renaissance time by Francis I. on average, 5 times bigger than the average castle. So quite impressive castle. The Loire Valley is famous for its castle, but also for cheese. And we'll take you to a smaller castle where you'll get to taste cheese and, of course, taste wine, because the Loire Valley is famous for its wine.
Virginie, if you can go back for a second, I have to linger on this cheese slide. Personally, I remember being in France and having camembert for the first time and
Yep.
falling in love. What would you say is your favorite cheese in France?
So I love lots of cheese, but actually on that tour, we go to the small town of Celles-sur-Cher, which is the name of the town, village, name of the cheese, and name of the wine. And it's a goat cheese, and it's really good. It has different stages. So if it's fresh, it's very mild. And then when it's very hard, it has a different taste. Celles-sur-Cher would be one of my favorite. So, and I get to have people taste it, and that's usually a cheese that people like.
Well, I could stay on this slide for a full hour, but we should probably keep going.
It's dinner time, right? Almost for you, huh?
Exactly.
So the Loire Valley is the land of the 1,000 châteaux. So we saw the biggest one, the most visited one, and my favorite one is the Chenonceau Castle, the Ladies' Castle over the Cher River. I don't need to comment on it. It's just a marvel. We stay in the small town of Amboise, which, guess what? It has a castle too, just above the Loire River that you see, the longest river of France that you see on this slide. But it's also the home of, the last home of Leonardo da Vinci. He spent the last 3 years of his life in Amboise, and he had a little castle of his own. That's the Clos Lucé. And when you visit, you get to see copies of what he actually created, drew on paper. So very interesting, to see the engineer side of Leonardo. We leave the Loire Valley on this tour, and then my heart will be beating a little bit faster because we go to Brittany, and that's where I'm from. Now, we only go to Brittany for lunch, and you'll get to enjoy galette, the savory crepe, and then crepe there. And then we get to my wow moment, everybody's wow moment, no matter what the weather is like, the Mont St-Michel. I've seen it since I was a kid. I've been there, I don't know how many times, and it's still wow. The Mont St-Michel, depending on the time of the month, you'll have the tide. You may see it with no water around or surrounded by water, but it is extraordinary. We divide our group into small pods of people to find their hotel rooms. Nobody can get lost. It's an island anyway. And we get to enjoy views like this and see sunset and sunrise. We just spent one night, but it's really special on this tour.
And
Have you
Virginie,
been there, Gabe?
I have not, but I'm
Yeah.
wondering, can you explain to our viewers the value of staying overnight, especially in a popular place like Mont Saint-Michel?
Well, the Mont Saint-Michel, after Paris, is the most visited place in France. So, and it's an island, it's a teeny island, so it gets packed. So we arrive around 5-ish when the crowds are leaving, and we see them leaving, and we spend the night, get to enjoy it when it's quite quiet, because there are not many hotels, so you cannot accommodate so many people. We tour the abbey in the morning, and when we leave, you see the amount of people coming in. So it is an advantage to spend the night there. Not easy to do, but we know how to make it right for you. So that's the way to enjoy it. I remember a few years ago, my brother went, and he didn't ask me before. And he remembered it as a kid when it was not that packed. And he was just, what's going on? And he was with his 2 children, and he was just like, this is not fun. It's like, so we do it. So I told him, this is the way you should do it. So voila.
I agree, and it's like what we also do in Venice is there are some places that are extremely packed during the day, but we feel like they still have so much cultural and historic merit that we want to see them. And so staying overnight, I think, is a great thing that our tours prioritize in instances like this.
That's the way to go. So the Mont Saint-Michel is in Normandy, but of course, Normandy is very well known for the D-Day beaches. And so we're going to spend a full day exploring them. I often have travelers who tell me it is a bit odd to see Omaha Beach with people sunbathing and some people in Speedos. Yes, my father generation, they wear it and it's normal for them. But that's what we fought for. That's why you came to liberate us so that we can enjoy the freedom that we have today. We'll explore the Pointe du Hoc. So we go to several sites. We don't go to museums. We enjoy the benefit of having a local guide. And this is Dale, one of our local guide, who's going to bring the history alive of what happened here more than 80 years ago. So it is a highlight on the Heart of France tour to spend a day with a local guide on the D-Day beaches. So exploring, that's again the Pointe du Hoc here, where you see remnants and they're still standing there. We will be going to the American Cemetery on that day, which is a very moving moment. The American Cemetery is just overlooking Omaha Beach. And then we'll go also to small villages where we were impacted by the war, and such as Sainte-Mère-l'Église that you could have seen on the Longest Day movie, for example. We leave Normandy. It's time to make our way back to Paris on this tour, and we stop in Giverny. Giverny was where Monet spent 40 years, so half of his life, and that was his main piece of art, the gardens of Giverny that you see here. Any time of the year you visit it, it's just different. Flowers are blooming. Visiting his house feels very special. So that's how we cap our tour before coming back to Paris.
Well, that was a beautiful little loop that covered really an astounding amount of history. I know that we now have a few itineraries. I think our remaining ones kind of all start in the north and work their way south. So I think the first one we have is Loire to the south of France.
Exactement. So here you have where I'm going to take you next. We start in Chartres, not too far from Paris, but just a different world. Very small town, very quiet. So you get to experience how the French live in a mid-sized town. And an hour from Paris, we have the cathedral. The Cathedral of Chartres, famous for its stained glass windows, has been cleaned for the last 10 years. It is beautiful to go there. Really, really neat. The Bleu de Chartres, that famous blue that you see here, is what made it famous already in the 13th century. And we learn about the art of stained glass windows on that tour. On this itinerary, we also go to the Loire Valley, but a different part. We go to the western side of the Loire Valley, which is the longest river of France. And we stay in the small town, Chinon, that you see here, with a fortress. And we explore more of the châteaux. Villandry, known for its garden, Azay-le-Rideau, named the jewel of the Loire Valley. You cannot get enough of castles. I mean, they're all different, they're all beautiful. Then we still make our way south, and on our tour, of course, we see beautiful sights, we enjoy life, but we have to remember, the reality of France 80 years ago, and the small village of Oradour-sur-Glane was destroyed 4 days after D-Day, and they've decided to keep the village as it was found after the destruction. So it's a moving stop on this itinerary, but very important. And then we arrive in the Dordogne, which you mentioned earlier for being the place with the most prehistoric art in the world. And we stay 3 days in Sarlat. Sarlat, this is where you'll get your vacation from your vacation. We like to have this on the longer tours and time it to be there on Saturday morning, because Sarlat has just one of the most beautiful farmers market in France. In the Dordogne, we have more castles. Those have a different reason for being there than the Loire Valley. And we float on the Dordogne River on one of those boats. Small villages that will be on our ride, such as La Roque-Gajac, which is one of the most beautiful villages of France. We have 260 of them, I believe, and there is a reason why we call them the most beautiful villages of France.
And Virginie, I have a quick question about La Roque-Gajac.
Très bien.
All of these small towns, you said that you have kind of 260 that have that designation. Are those towns that are often still have their own lively local populations, or are a lot of them now mostly centered around tourism?
We still have people who live in La Roque-Gajac. Now, they're going to have restaurants, they're going to have stores for the tourists, but they're still alive here. You go to La Roque-Gajac and the people still live in those houses that you see here on the picture. It's only a 15-minute ride from Sarlat, and people enjoy the proximity. And that's the beauty of France, is that we have small cities, but you can still live in the small villages. And so that's how we keep them alive, because people want to live in those places.
I love that. I mean, it's amazing to tour sometimes small towns that even if they're now mostly kept alive by tourism, but it's really special to experience these small towns that people still live in. So I love to hear that.
And we have lots of those, for sure. Then we get to another town, almost at the border, what used to be the border with Spain, Carcassonne, which is that's a difficult one to say, Carcassonne, the fortress town. This is not Walt Disney built. This is actually a town that was built to protect the border. And we only spend one night, and we have a guided tour to understand why it was built like this and what was the purpose of this before we make our way. So Carcassonne, walking at night in Carcassonne is quite exceptional too. We then go to the Languedoc-Roussillon we were talking about earlier, Gail, and this is, we make a winery stop. We get to try the wine of the south, west, and have a picnic lunch, because, you know, France is all about food and wine. So we have to do that several times on our tours. And then we reach Provence, and we stay on this tour in the city of Arles, which has big past with a mighty amphitheater, theater, and this used to also be the home of Van Gogh. So we have art and we have history just in one town. It's a very lively town. I was just right there finishing that tour 10 days ago, and they had a big feria. They had lots of people playing music in the street. Was very lively. That's what France is all about too. And just a day trip, not even, I mean, we do a half-day trip to the Pont du Gard. So talking about Roman architecture, this aqueduct, so this bridge, which is part of a big aqueduct, has been standing for almost 2,000 years. And I'm not going to reveal how we discover it, because I want to keep some surprises for our viewers when they come on tour. But it's like the Mont St-Michel. I've been there, I don't know how many times. It's still, wow, it's still fun. So if it's fun to your guide, it has to be fun for the travelers, I'm sure. We discover Provence, very small village, and you talked about, you know, do those villages still have life? Les Baux-de-Provence is one of the most beautiful villages of France, another one which lives of tourism, but there are reasons why. I mean, you have views you see up to the Mediterranean Sea, just you know, stunning landscapes from the top of this village. And we finish this tour on the French Riviera in Nice, where you get to see why in French we call it the Côte d'Azur, not the French Riviera, but the azure blue coast. It is very lively. It feels very Italian. You have to have gelato almost every day, of course. That's what I did last week. And it also has, as a big city, it has very impressive museums such as the Matisse Museum and the Chagall Museum. Many artists lived in the South for the light that inspired them. So voila.
Voila. Virginie, what is your preferred gelato flavor?
Oh, I have to say it's the hazelnut one. I had chocolate and hazelnuts every day for the last 10 days. It was super warm. We're having a very hot spring. That's just an excuse for gelato, right?
Exactly. Well, I don't need many excuses, but I love pistachio. And
Ooh, that's nice too.
Virginie, I think one thing that maybe newer travelers don't know is that each tour has a tour code. And usually it's pretty logical, like Poland is POL, and then the date of your departure, and Paris is PAR. But our next tour is always hard for me to remember because it's called the Best of Eastern France, but it's FVV because it used to be known, it evolved from a tour called French Villages and Vineyards, I believe. So
exactly. So let me take you there. But first, before I take you there, I want you to see how this is really all of Eastern France, which is very interesting because the borders of France have changed a lot. So you talked about the different regions of France at the beginning of the presentation, Gabe, and this is the best example of you are staying in France, but it feels like you're in different countries. So let's see what we would see on the Best of Eastern France or FVV tour. We start in Reims with another mighty cathedral. I talk a lot about cathedral, but they're all different. And you don't have those massive cathedrals in the US. So It is always impressive to visit them. And they do light show on them, most of them close to Paris. But of course, Reims, as you say Reims, we say Reims, is known for its champagne. It's the capital of champagne. So we start tasting champagne and learning how it's made there. Then we're going to head towards the east proper, but we again have a very important stop in Verdun. We spent a half day with a local guide in Verdun to learn about World War I. Before making our way to the Alsace region, we stay in the small, colorful town of Colmar, where, well, this looks more German. Having grown up in Brittany, this is for me like going to Germany, except that they speak French. So it makes the life of the French a bit easier. The food is definitely different. You have to try choucroute. I always have people who are like, oh, sauerkraut. I'm not sure I want that. To tell them, we are in France. This may look like Germany, but we are in France. And the choucroute is pretty tasty. Now, you don't eat it every day, but when you're in Alsace, you have to try the local food. Colmar has I think it's one of the favorite museum of Rick in France, the Unterlinden Museum, with an amazing polyptych, like a piece of art that, you unfold it. And we have a local guide explaining us the history and the art behind this piece of art. Of course, Alsace is famous for its wine, La Route des Vins d'Alsace, very different wines. And so we get to drive it in our bus, and we get to go to the top of that hill, the Château du Haut-Königsberg, to learn about the fact that this used to be German, then became French, then German again, French, German, and finally French. So we get to learn the history through the sites. So that's the view you get from the top, and you get to see Germany on the other side. We'll be tasting wine, the Alsatian wines, and having good times. So that's why this tour used to be called Villages and Vineyards, because we stay in smaller towns and we discover different types of wine in France. We make our way then to Beaune. I live an hour south of Beaune. Beaune is the capital of the wines of Burgundy, so wines that are famous all over the world. A beautiful town with some history, the Hôtel Dieu, the hospices of Beaune, which is now a charity, known as a charity auction in the world for selling wine. And here you're going to be tasting other specialty that everybody in the US knows, Bœuf Bourguignon, Burgundy beef. We like to make you taste the local specialties, things that you may know and things that you may not know, but people are adventurous. That's the beauty of our tours. Rick says you have to stay away from your comfort zone and just go for what the French eat. So we'll be exploring the vineyards also in the Côte d'Or. And then us guides, we love picnicking. So we are going to create a French picnic for our groups so they see what a French picnic looks like. I've lived 11 years in the US and I got used to the American barbecue, but the French picnic is special to my heart. We keep going south along the eastern border of France and we arrive at the Mont Blanc, the highest peak in Western Europe. And this is the town of Chamonix, where you are going to have again your vacation from your vacations. You have a full day where you can explore and burn all of the calories because, of course, we have to have cheese, such as those people enjoying a cheese fondue. On your vacation, from your vacation, of course, your guide is going to tell you how to use your time. And for me, my favorite is to go to the top that you can see of the cable car, the Aiguille du Midi, view of the Mont Blanc and view of Italy and Switzerland. And then if you are into hiking, we have lots of different hikes that you can do in the area. So that's a good break in that 14 days tour.
And Virginie, if people are interested in hiking, but maybe they're not packing a lot of gear, are there easier hikes that they can do?
We actually, I say hiking, but I should say walking in the mountains with lots of rocks. You have to have shoes, but you don't have to have hiking shoes, tennis shoes. I have about 5 different hikes or walks that I recommend to people based on their level of hiking experience. You can stroll in the valley on a very flat surface with views of the Mont Blanc, views on many peaks, Or you can decide to do a little bit more hiking. But we, as guides, we know where to tell you to go, just so that you remain safe, of course.
And I love that we talk about these vacation from your vacation days, but it's not just, oh, to give the guide a day off.
Oh,
You guys
no.
still really work hard to kind of be a consultant for the day and help people, give people advice for how to spend that time. So I always appreciate that when I'm on tour.
And what I love to do on that vacation from your vacation, I plan a little cheese tasting or a wine tasting at the end. And then it's a good time at the end of the day. So everybody regroups and we talk about, what have you been doing today? So we always find time for happy hours. Yes.
Wonderful.
We stay in the Alps as we go south. We go to the lovely town of Annecy, just as to go on the lake, one of the most beautiful lake of France. And then we arrive in the northern part of Provence. We stay 3 nights in Vaison-la-Romaine, Vaison, the Roman town. And so we learn about the Roman past of Vaison. But of course, Provence is known for its food. And we have a lovely hotel on top of the hill, and we get to eat at the hotel. So it saves you a few steps from going back and down, enjoying the Provençal food, and then exploring the Roman world of Provence. So that's the theater in Vaison-la-Romaine. And then a much better preserved theater in the town of Orange, just about 40 minutes away. We do a little side trip to Orange Theater. Of course, Provence is known for its wine, the Côte du Rhône wine, and we go to a really cool winery. I'd say that's one of the top moment on this tour for travelers. Even on a rainy day, we know how to make it fun. It's very rare to have a rainy day in Provence, but this is French life. It rains, we are going to make it fun. So we actually eat if it rains. I've only done that once in the over 10 years I've been working for Rick. But we eat where they make the wine, which is pretty fun. And a lot of good food. We finish our Best of Eastern France tour where I am right now in Aix-en-Provence. This is just a 5-minute walk from where I'm staying. Beautiful colors of Provence in the vegetables, in the fruits. It's a very easy town.
All right, so our MyWay Tour itinerary. Really, we're going to go over this one pretty quickly. We've already reviewed most of the places on this itinerary, so it's mostly going to be a review. I do want to remind people, though, of what a MyWay Tour is. So I used to use a less artful analogy that doing a MyWay Tour is like getting the skeleton of the tour. All of the transportation is arranged for you once you get to the starting location. You still need to get your flights to and from, but all of your transportation is arranged, all of your hotels are arranged, and you get to decide how you fill in your time because there are no guided activities. You do still have a guide, or sometimes they call it a tour escort, who travels along with you, kind of like as a travel along consultant. So there will be a lead guide that is with you the entire time from start to finish and can advise you, but there's going to be no planned activities throughout the day. So the more artful itinerary that I came up with just during this show is it's as if we've already purchased the canvas and all of the paints for you. You just need to show up and get to painting.
We've covered that, and lots of time for you to explore Paris. Yes. And the Loire Valley, and then we get to Lyon. And I used to live in Lyon for 4 years and loved Lyon. And I think, Gabe, you're coming this summer to Lyon, right?
I haven't booked my tickets, but I need to, after the festival is over, that's my first priority.
That's what you're going to do. Lyon is it's the third biggest city of France, but it just doesn't feel like a big city. As I told you earlier, I'm not a city person, and I lived in Lyon for 4 years and I loved it. It has 2 rivers, it has 2 hills, and it has the Roman past. So huge. It used to be the capital of what we called Roman Gaul, what the previous name of France. So you can explore this. One of my favorite place to see is actually to climb to the top of this basilica, and that's something you can do on the MyWay Tour. We explain what you could do on your free time and how you can book this. You cannot do it as a group of 25, but you could do it, a small group of 4 or 5 people. Beautiful view over the city. I took those shots. Again, a war moment on that time. Lyon has an old part that we call the Vieux Lyon. Here you go, one more French word, Vieux Lyon. But it has all of the modern feel with lots of museums also. And a cathedral, because of course you're in France, you have to have a mighty cathedral. I like to take people on the Traboul. That's one of the specialty of Lyon. We have those hidden passageways that were actually created when people wanted to live in Lyon in the Renaissance. So they build, and then they still have to have access to the river. And those Traboul were used during the Resistance as passageway to escape the Nazi. Lyon was the capital of the Resistance during World War II. And I was a few years ago, we filmed with Rick in that silk workshop. Silk is one of the specialty of Lyon. Lyon has several capital titles. And I remember how this lady at some point was showing us how to the different ways to put a scarf around your neck. That was a lot of fun. Lyon is famous for its food. The restaurant there, the traditional restaurants are called les bouchons lyonnais. It's big on meat, but again, you don't eat in a bouchon every single day. You have to experience one. Being the capital of gastronomy, there is food for everyone, different type of food for everyone in Lyon. And this is all of the titles I was telling you about. Paris is known as the capital of light, but Lyon has also a capital of light title, and you get to experience it at night. Super safe city to walk in at night. That's what I love about France, is even Paris, it's very safe. On that tour, we also go to the Pont du Gard, which I mentioned earlier, as we make our way south. Stay in Arles or in Avignon, so two cities of Provence. That's Avignon, which used to be the city of the popes, which is appropriate to talk about right now. At some point, we had two popes, one in Italy and one in France in the 13th century. At some point, we even had a third pope. And so the Pont d'Avignon, I think every single American knows the song. I'm not going to sing, but Sur le Pont d'Avignon, that you can visit on the Rhône River. And then we finish the tour again in Nice on the French Riviera, where you can enjoy the pebble. I always tell my group, if they're disappointed and saying, "Oh, but there is no sand," you just move your back onto the pebble. Some people pay to have a hot stone massage, and then you get to do that for free on the Riviera. Isn't that great? And so finishing where I was for the last week. I love the French Riviera.
That is my memory of on that first trip. I also went down to Nice, and it was a little bit of a cool spring day, but it was sunny, and my friends and I were determined to have a beach day. And so we nestled ourselves into the pebbles and soaked up as much sun as we could. Probably would have been a bit nicer a month later, but it was still a lovely experience.
Oh,
So,
it's known as the Florida of Europe. So even in
oh.
winter, it's nice. Yeah, very nice.
Well, thank you, Virginie, for again, many of the stops on the MyWay tour are repeated from our other tours, but the difference is that you get to choose your own adventure in them a bit more. All of our tours have some free time. This one's just all free time. So we have a few other itineraries that we're not going to go into tonight, but that are partially in Paris. And I just wanted to quickly review those for everybody. So of course, we have the Basque country of Spain and France in 9 days, which starts in the French Basque country in Bayonne. And we discussed that actually last night during the Spain and Portugal tours presentation, if you want a refresher on that itinerary. The MyWay Alpine Europe, if you want to get to beautiful Mont Blanc, that itinerary ends in Chamonix, along with other alpine wonders. And then all of our kind of best of Europe tours pass through France, through Burgundy, and in Paris. So that's the 21-day tour, the 14-day tour, and our Family Europe tour. Rick discussed those during our Festival of Tours kickoff from last week. So you can find information for all of those tours by going into the recordings from our previous Festival of Tours shows. All right. Whew, we covered a lot of ground, Virginie.
It's a big
I'm a little
country.
tired. I think I might need a French
Oh là
pastry for
là!
energy.
Oui, aïe, aïe, le croissant. What else do you have there? A
So
croissant?
I have this is a raspberry croissant. This is
Uh-huh.
an almond pain au chocolat. And this is
Oh.
a, tell me if I'm pronouncing it correctly, a kouign-amann.
Kouign-amann. Oh, that's from Brittany, where
Kouign-amann.
I'm from. Oh, you're going
Kouign-amann.
to get your butter fixed today.
I know. So I'm going to welcome Lisa back on. And Lisa, don't worry, you're going to get one of these after the show. Um,
And I'll
and
get them in a few hours, just very soon.
Oh, I know what I will be choosing if it's available. Thank you both so much for a wonderful, wonderful show. Gabe, am I sharing the reminders right now before we do Q&A?
Yes.
Okay. The Tours 101, it's an hour-long presentation about what life is really like on our tours. We talk about rotating seats on the bus. We talk about bathroom stops every 2.5 hours, all of the little details. And we have that. So we have a live one coming up on May 8th, and we have one that I just did a few days ago that's up on our website. So if you don't want to wait until May 8th, you can see that. Gabe already mentioned our travel style: no grumps, pack light, have fun, be curious. 24 to 28 people on a 48 to 52 seat bus, so plenty of room to spread out. Packing light and right, as we mentioned. Also, I will plug my packing list because I just saw somebody online today who said, I can't pack in a carry-on size bag because I have too much medicine and a CPAP. And I'm like, wait a minute, sister, I'm here for you. I've got those tips. So Rick Steves' YouTube channel, The Travel Talks, packing will have that information for you. And then plenty of walking and somebody wonderful like Virginie to go with you on your tour. And then Virginie introduces you to all of her French local friends. And so you get sort of 2-for-1 guides that in so many places. That's the Rick Steves tour philosophy. So you will also find it on our website. And Gabe, is there anything I'm forgetting? They should tune in tomorrow night for Central and Eastern Europe.
Central and Eastern Europe with Cameron. And then on May 2nd is our grand finale show. I will be joined by Robin. We'll review some wow moments from some itineraries that didn't get included in the major regions that we're going through. And we're also going to be giving away those 2 city tours. So I think that's everything, Lisa. So let's get to those questions.
Okay. This one is very specific and it is for Virginie. Virginie, living like a local in Paris, what is your favorite bakery?
Ooh la la. Actually, so I was telling you about the Londres Eiffel hotel where we stay in the 7th district. And why is it my favorite? Because it's right there. So sometimes I skip, not skip the whole breakfast. It's very good breakfast at the hotel, but I just cross the street and I go for a pain au chocolat. Gabe was showing the pain au chocolat with almonds, but I just go for a pain au chocolat. And the name, Bergeron. Bergeron, I think is the name, on the Rue Saint-Dominique, not far from the Eiffel Tower. It's always packed. You can't miss it. Beautiful interior and goodies, breakfast, sandwiches. Wow, everything is good. Woo.
Okay, that was from Veronica. That was a valid question, but since I also sleep in that neighborhood, I thought I would get that information for myself as well, because I'm not stupid. Jody asks, do people actually live on Mont Saint-Michel? Is it self-sustaining?
It is. We have a population of usually about 10 nuns and monks, and then about 25 people, 20 to 30, depends if a family moves in or out. But yes, they have people living on the Mont Saint-Michel, but maximum 50.
Wow, okay. Gabe, this is a big and important question for you. After this presentation, what destination spoke to you the most?
Ooh, you're putting me on the spot. I have to choose now.
Well, you can put it off till the end of the show if you want to, and I can ask you something else. It's up to you.
No, I do have an answer. I think if I had to pick one of the 5 itineraries, I think that I would choose the Loire to the south of France. I personally have been to Paris quite a few times before. And I find the Dordogne and the thought of visiting La Roque-Gageac, that's just that little village carved into the side of the mountain, just to be really enchanting. And then also seeing the palaces of the Loire Valley, especially Villandry with all of the gardens. I think that that's the one that won me over.
Nice. Well, in that vein, then I will turn to Virginie because Karen is headed to Saint-Cercle-le-Popie in the fall, and she wants to know, is there anything in the area she should not miss? And if my geographical knowledge is correct, that's the same area, right? That's the Dordogne?
Yeah.
Okay.
2 years ago, so 2 years ago when I did book research, I rented a car, and I'm assuming Karen is going to rent a car because it's pretty in the middle of nowhere. Just driving, I drove from all of the Dordogne, Saint-Cirque-la-Popie to the Loire Valley, beautiful, the lot. Honestly, this is an area where you just go from one village to another and you stop whenever you want. Rocamadour is close to that. That's a village perched on the cliffs, famous as a pilgrimage town, Rocamadour. But going to Saint-Cirque-la-Popie, it's yeah, okay. You'll enjoy, Karen. Yeah.
All right, Gabe, when you are
Lisa?
traveling in France, cash versus credit card.
So my policy, honestly, with many European countries these days, I always like to take out about 1 to 2 days worth of spending money, especially if you're in smaller towns or if you're just getting a coffee or a baguette. It's always nice to have the option to just pay in cash or to leave a little cash tip. But, the vast majority of places are going to accept card these days. So my typical strategy is I go to an ATM when I arrive. That's when you're going to get the best exchange rate. I take out 1 to 2 days worth of cash. I try to use my card as much as possible and only use cash when I need to. And then kind of as I get to the last day or two of my trip, then I kind of try to use up all of my cash.
And if I can give you a tip, not just as a foreigner, as a French person, French people, you go to the farmer's market, they never have change. So you find a bakery that accepts, they have a machine where you put your bill and then it gives you the coins, and that's where you break your bills. And know that, yeah, we accept a lot of credit cards. I was updating the guidebook here, and you can pay many places public transportation by just tapping your card now. So, but don't feel frustrated when they tell you, don't you have smaller change? It's not because you're American. They do it to us, French people.
That's excellent information.
And always good to have an excuse to buy another pastry. You need the change. The only way
Or
to
a
get
baguette.
is to buy a pastry.
Or a baguette. Okay, well, since you brought up tipping, the two of you, no one asked this, but I know that almost all of our viewers would like to know, what is the tipping culture in France?
So in Paris, you round up. Now, what does rounding up mean? If you have a good waiter or a good waitress, you don't do 20% like in the US. Now, if your bill is 39.50 and you round up to 40 euro and you had great service, they may give you what I call the French round, because it's like, so in Paris, it's customary to leave a few euros. They accept tip on the credit card, but the word tip in French is pour boire, to drink. And the custom is that it was money for the waiter or waitress to get a drink after their shift. So it's better to leave coins. When you're outside of Paris, you don't have to tip. I know it's very difficult for Americans. If you're having a good time, leave a few coins, but don't leave 20%. No.
So if your bill was $39.50 and you had a great service, you could leave 42.
Yeah, exactly. A few coins. Just, but 5%, that works.
Okay. Let's see. Virginie, what do your tour members find the most surprising about France?
That the French are nice.
They're wonderful.
Because they know that it's going to be a beautiful country. But there's always that apprehension. And I was a teacher in the US, and I lived 11 years in the States, and I wanted to understand how come there is that misunderstanding. I don't know if it's misunderstanding or just different culture. We're Western culture. We are similar. I mean, the world is flat. We kind of live the same way. We wear jeans and t-shirts. We have fast foods in France. So how come there is that that lack of understanding that creates stereotypes as, well, the Americans are loud and the French are just too cold and too rude. Again, it's just the fact that you have to use those easy words, bonjour, merci, just know how to use those words. And so they're always surprised by that. Then, of course, they're going to know that, yes, the food is great. Yes, the wine is good. It's just going to check on what they were expecting. It's going to be validated.
I think it was always easier for me because I'm from a small town, so we would never walk into a store without saying hello to the person anyway. But what I always tell my tour members, because I have the joy of introducing them to France after they've been to Italy and Switzerland and Germany and Austria. And so I just say, always treat a French person as a human first and then get down to business, because our feeling is we need to get down to business. We don't want to take up too much of your time, because that's rude to take up too much of your time. We don't want to be a bother. But no, you always just, bonjour, monsieur. May I ask you a question? Like, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's just a keyword, bonjour. That's it.
Lovely. You also mentioned clothing, and Rosemary did ask, what type of clothing is appropriate in Paris as a woman?
If you are a Parisian, high heels. If you are a person traveling to Paris, regular shoes. We all dress up completely fine. You in the streets, everybody will be sneakers. It's no big deal. People always tend to pack one shirt if you go to, dress shirt if you go to a nice restaurant, but we're pretty casual. So I wouldn't worry. You want to be comfortable. That's the main thing. You don't have to, have a scarf as a man or as a woman or as a man. A scarf, you wear black and you have your scarf changing. Easy to pack. That's very French. Even in summertime, we have our scarves.
Thank you so much. Let me see. How many questions do I have left? Gabe, favorite French dish as a vegetarian? What's your go-to?
Well, I mean, I think a baguette and cheese is the first thing that comes to my mind, but I do remember on that first trip to Paris and elsewhere in France being a little disappointed that I felt like a lot of the really iconic French dishes were all meat-based, the steak tartare and the escargot. And so I was delighted. I had not realized before my trip that ratatouille was vegetarian. So I would say getting a good ratatouille then would be my favorite.
Thank you. Ratatouille, vegan actually, right? No
Yes,
butter.
made
I
with
believe
olive
so.
oil, not butter, olive oil. Yep.
Excellent. Okay, last question. What time of year do you think it would be best for people to travel to France?
Alors, to Paris, I would say to avoid too many crowds, spring and later fall. You may have rain here and there, but the weather is very mild. The rest of France, we have very mild weather. I just finished the Loire to the south of France tour. We had one day of afternoon of rain, and every other day we were just wearing, shirts, pants, have some layers. So, what we used to call the shoulder season, which is extending a bit, but April to mid-June, then it gets fairly hot. Well, it can be fairly hot, but again, it could be, you never know. And then early September to late October for the rest of France.
Fantastic. Gabe, anything you want to add?
No, I mean, I would just add to keep in mind that one wonderful thing about France is that it has a variety of natural wonders. So, of course, you can be up in the mountains more in the summer in Chamonix. Obviously, if you want to go to ski, going in the winter would be better. But you can kind of go any time of year, but maybe pick your destination to be, cooler by being along the coast or up in the mountains if you're going in the middle of the summer. And then also just because, especially, it's great to be in the parks with the joie de vivre, but also Paris has, especially Paris, but other cities in France have so many great museums and things to do indoors that if you do have a bad day here or there, you can easily craft a great indoor day that is still very thrilling. So I think France is particularly good for if you do want to do some off-season or even winter travel.
And we have lots of cafe and restaurants, which is part of the culture. So.
Well, I would like to thank you both very much for sharing your knowledge with our audience. It was a wonderful presentation. I would like to invite everybody to come back tomorrow night, and I would like to ask both of you, my fabulous French speakers, because I know Gabe speaks a little French, if you would say goodbye to our audience in your favorite language.
Ooh,
And my
well,
favorite language, that has to be French for me. Au revoir.
and I will go with Spanish and I will say, hasta luego.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Join us
Au revoir.
tomorrow.